Kiara, my name is Jimi Arranchado. I am currently pursuing my Doctor of Philosophy in Law at the University of Canterbury in New Zealand. I have a Master of Laws in Global Antitrust Law and Economics from the George Mason University in the US and a Juris Doctor in Economics degree from the Philippines. Prior to pursuing my PhD, I worked with the Philippine government across various agencies, one of which is the Philippine Competition Commission, the antitrust arm of the Philippine government. That is why the topic I chose for my PhD thesis is related to competition law and policy. My thesis looks into state-owned enterprises, or SOEs, and competitive neutrality in Southeast Asia. The proposed research explores the thesis that a robust competitive neutrality framework among the Association of Southeast Asian Nation member states will not only help to create a level playing field between SOEs and private firms domestically, it will also facilitate advancing the regional integration goals of the ASEAN. Competitive neutrality entails that no entity operating in economic market is subject to undue competitive advantages or disadvantages. That is, all enterprises, whether public or private, domestic or foreign, face the same set of rules. It requires the state to refrain from leveraging its legislative or fiscal powers to favor SOEs over private entities, as such practice can ultimately distort competition. Establishing a competitive neutrality framework is essential because, in addition to enhancing transparency and accountability of activities carried out by government businesses, it also aims to encourage effective competition by limiting any unfair advantages received by SOEs over their private counterparts simply because they are owned by the government. With effective competition, this facilitates the growth of efficient firms and the exit of inefficient ones, thereby resulting in substantial gains like price reduction, superior quality, and increased choices of products and services, and overall economic advancement. In Southeast Asia, SOEs continue to be a driving force of the region's economic landscape. They are an integral part of the ASEAN member states' economies, being essential players in many sectors in charge of undertaking crucial infrastructure projects, offering vital services, and creating jobs. Measured by its contribution to GDP, the SOE sector is a core pillar in each member state's economy. The presence of extensive state ownership in an economy, however, could potentially distort market competition. In many instances, SOEs are granted privileges and immunities to which their privately owned counterparts do not have access. Such privileges could be in the form of subsidies and grants, tax breaks, access to low-cost capital, regulatory immunity, or exclusive contracts or rights. Eventually, this may impact private competitors who could potentially be more efficient market participants. Recognizing the potential anti-competitive behavior of SOEs, various jurisdictions have instituted mechanisms. We have the European Union's state aid control and Australia's competitive neutrality framework being two of the most established models that control SOEs' advantages, thereby creating equitable market conditions. As demonstrated by the EU and Australia establishing a robust competitive neutrality framework, spurs competition, which, as competition principles would suggest, enhances overall market efficiency and optimizes consumer welfare. This thesis primarily aims to fill the research gaps on competitive neutrality in developing countries, especially in Southeast Asia, where SOEs continue to play a significant role. While competitive neutrality is a principle well entrenched in the economic and competition policies of developed economies, it remains emerging in developing countries. With this perspective, this study will look into the existing competitive neutrality landscape of Southeast Asian jurisdictions with the aim of understanding the legal and regulatory frameworks for SOEs. This understanding is important as the study proceeds to delve into an evaluation of the effectiveness and sufficiency of the current competitive neutrality frameworks being employed by the ASEAN member states. An examination of the ASEAN's competitive neutrality framework demands the application of a comparative analysis. This thesis acknowledges that the EU has a complex and one of the most well-established sets of competition policies and laws, and offers a rich discussion, policy and case-wise, especially in matters of state aid. The Treaty of Rome, which gave rise to the European Economic Community and eventually the EU, already prohibited the provision of state aid to ensure fair competition among member states, thereby aligning with the objective of creating a unified market. State aid, which is defined as an advantage in any form whatsoever conferred by national public authorities to undertakings on a selective basis, is explicitly prohibited by Article 107, Paragraph 1 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, or the TFEU. To provide policy options for the ASEAN, a comparative analysis shall be used to analyze benchmarks and standards for evaluation, understand the diverse competitive neutrality approaches that the EU has undertaken, pick up valuable policy lessons and adaptations from the EU, and provide legal insights and precedents. Considering the maturity of the EU state aid framework, there is a great deal and rich resources of information that can be gathered in the form of legislative documents, judicial decisions, academic publications, institutional reports and studies, and data and statistics. Because of the limited research on the subject, the thesis expects potential implications for, first, the SAN as a regional entity in view of its vision of a single market and production base. Second, for policymakers, with the intention of developing interventions that would strictly uphold the principle of competitive neutrality. Third, for competition law and policy enforcers in light of their mandate to develop robust legal and procedural frameworks for the effective enforcement of competitive neutrality. And finally, for the scholars, with the hope of conducting more research on competitive neutrality in Southeast Asia, taking into account the emerging trends of competition law and policy and the trajectory of the ASEAN's regional integration efforts. Thank you.